Good afternoon and welcome. In 2021, the European Union's Green Deal will increasingly come to life through legislative proposal and other transformative initiatives. For this ninth edition of the Global Annual Energy Meeting, EsadeGeo is hosting, together with the representation of the European Commission in Spain and EIT InnoEnergy, a series of webinars to explore the geopolitics of the Green Deal. This third session of the Global Annual Energy Meeting will tackle the critical questions of financing the Green Deal, private and public investment in the energy transition in the European Union and abroad. Becoming the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050 will require significant public and private investment. In order to reach the European Union new greenhouse reduction target of 55 by 2030, the annual investment in the energy system will need to be approximately about 350 billion higher this decade than the previous one. So today we would like to address some questions that are very relevant for this topic, like will the COVID-19 recovery plan and the European Green Deal succeed in mobilizing sufficient public and private investments? How can policies such as the European Union taxonomy and European Green Bond standards scale up sustainable investment? What is the outlook for green finance more broadly? So plenty of relevant questions that will be addressed by a group of panelists that I believe is outstanding because they are real experts in the topic. And also I would say, or I'm happy to say, that is a very diverse panel. I mean, for the first, it's not normal to have more women than men in a panel in energy. And this time we have two fantastic women, but not because they are women, but because they are also experts, and one man. So let me introduce the different panelists and speakers. The first one is going to be Elena Bow. Elena Bow is the Innovation Director and is a member of the Executive Board of InnoEnergy, one of the organizations that is sponsoring this event, where she has been involved since 2007. The second speaker will be Svetlana Kuzmanova. She's a policy advisor at E3G, who is a European climate think tank, and she focuses on sustainable finance legislative reforms at the European Union level and also across European Union member states. And finally, we have Isidoro Tapia, who besides being a very good friend of mine, he's a senior expert at the European Investment Bank, and previously he was the General Secretary of IDAE, who is the Spanish energy agency. So we have a very good mix of gender, but we have also a very good mix of different angles and perspectives to address this important issue, which is how to finance the Green Deal and the new energy investments in Europe. What we would like to do is a very interactive session. So rather than presenting slides and material, we would like to create a dialogue between the different speakers and the different panelists. So we will start with the first question that I will ask each of the panelists to answer in 5 minutes to make the point. And then we'll have a round of personalized and group questions to be answered by all of them. Finally, we'll have a slot for the audience to ask specific questions to the different panelists. So I would suggest that when sending the question via the chat, you indicate whether it's a general question, is a question for a specific speaker. And then I will end up by asking a headline or a tweet to all our presenters or panelists. So let's start with the first question, the opening question. And for that question, I think the European Green Deal Investment Plan and the Next Generation EU funds are key to ensure that the economic recovery efforts carried out by member states, the public and the private sector and other stakeholders will be green and sustainable. However, the question is, are the current measures and instruments to mobilize finance enough to meet the 2030 and 2050 climate targets? So that's the question, and I will ask Elena to start by answering that, and then we will proceed with the rest of the presenters.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you for inviting me to be here. It's a great starting question, no? And I think that we should be very proud to be at this moment here in Europe, because I think that we are in an unprecedented moment, because Europe has created really a market opportunity. I mean, for three different reasons. One is that the energy transition and climate change today is at the core of the political agenda. And this is something that, I mean, listening to our president saying that, okay, for the COVID there will be a vaccine, but there will be no vaccine for the climate change, and that is why we have to foster all these initiatives, was really impressive, and it created a precedent and a role model for other countries. The other thing is that Europe and the member states are deploying massive financial resources. I think that besides all the resources that they were already planned, they have added 220 billion more for energy and climate that they did not exist before. And this is impressive. So this means that they are really putting the skin on the game in terms of financial capital. And then Europe also is, from a regulatory point of view, is ahead of the rest of the world. So for these reasons, we have created really a market opportunity, and we can see it because for the first time in the years, United States, US VCs are coming to Europe to invest. We have a global call in InnoEnergy last year, and 10% of the companies were US companies that they were coming to Europe because they have recognized that here there is a market opportunity. So we have a market opportunity, we have the technology, we have the talent, we have the capital. So what it is missing? And probably here it is one of the key things, which is the execution capability. And that it would be my point. We are missing the execution capability, and this is scalability and speed. And just an example about scalability. I mean, I think that we are missing an opportunity with the next generation EU, because here every single country are presenting their own plans, their own projects with different strategies. But what about a cross project, something which is really scalable, something that it is really having a huge impact? So this is something that it is not there. We have the same problem with the introduction of innovations in Europe. I mean, there is not a single market. I mean, for a European startup to address a market which is similar to the United States, that we would say about $21 trillion, they need to approach 28 different countries. So this is part of the complexity, that the lack of scalability and also the lack of speed, because we are in a pressure, is part of what we are missing. So in terms of financial resources, we are very well equipped. We have to be proud, but probably we have to put more efforts on the execution capability.
Good. So your message is very clear. We need execution capability, scalability, and speed. And probably we need also a new type of investor and new alternatives to invest in green. Svetlana, do you agree? Do you have a different point of view?
Thank you very much, Ivan, and thank you very much for inviting me and having me here with you today. I, to a large extent, agree with Elena and her assessment, and I agree that we are in this historic moment in time, and especially given COVID, we have this remarkable opportunity to use these difficulties at the moment to really reconstruct and boost our economy and our financial system. Just to give you a sense of where the funding needs are, the European Commission estimates that for climate transition, annually we will need 340 billion euros per year, and that's outside of the 447 billion euros that need to be invested in achieving our policy goals here in Europe. So in a sense, to reach our goals within the Next Generation EU, to reach the 2030 targets and the net zero 2050 targets, we would need huge investments. A lot has already been done. We have to admit that, and we can really be proud, as Elena mentioned, of what Europe has achieved and to what level Europe has actually led the way for the rest of the world. I think a lot has been done, and there is space for a lot more to be done. But what I want to say here is that the financial system as a whole would need to be reshaped. We all agree that we cannot continue with business as usual. So what I think is needed is for both public and private finance, for market players and institutional players, for policymakers to act together with this. So climate change and climate consideration are really mainstreamed within the whole of the financial system. Just to give you several examples, I think, and Isadora will talk about this after me, but EIB has done an incredible job, especially in terms of institutional leadership, establishing itself as a climate bank, as a green bank, to really lead the way for other public institutions, lending institutions to do the same. We have, as I mentioned, this incredible opportunity with the recovery spending and this boost to the economy to really reshape the way that our economy works. So within the Next Generation EU and the recovery and resilience funding, the national plans of member states, we have this incredible opportunity of this boost of spending into the economy to really reshape how we do things here in Europe. Another example is also the recent efforts by the European Central Bank. So we can see that the European Central Banks, the Eurosystem banks, are really starting to align around climate-related sustainability investments. So they have recently agreed on a common stance on this for non-monetary policies. So we see a lot already happening, and I would say that we definitely need this to be done quickly, because these are investments which would have an effect down the line. So this is not an immediate climate transition that we will see once we have the money. So I, to a sense, agree with Elena here that we need to really the capacity to deploy the money that we have now and the financial resources that we have now to act. I myself am looking at more from a private financial policy side of things. So I would say that Europe has really been a pioneer in, I would say, the disclosure regulation for private financial institutions and market players. The taxonomy that I hope we will have a chance to talk later on, is also something that Europe can be really proud of and really leading the way, because, and these are old pre-COVID estimates, 180 billion per year are needed from the private, as a private investment. So there is a gap that needs to complement the public spending and the public investments. So yeah, as I said, a lot is already underway. What is really needed is to act quickly and decisively. And I would add in the end that we need to really do this as a whole, as the whole European Union. So we need public and private institutions, European policymakers and member states to act as a whole and to really reconcile their differences and their disagreements in order to be able to mainstream, as I said, climate considerations within the whole of the financial system.
Good. Thank you very much. I think there are two words that you mentioned and that we will cover into the next question and answer session, which is transparency and taxonomy. No, I think these are two things that we need to discuss in more detail. You also say something that is very much related with what Elena mentioned before, who is the diversity. No, the diversity within the European Union. We have a diverging capacity, and the level of ambition across the Union needs to be taken into account if we really want these to succeed, no? And you also reinforced a lot this message of act quickly, no? that we cannot wait. We need to act quickly. No, and there is something that you mentioned in our previous conversation that I also find very important, and that you may want to elaborate later on, who is the fact that all the tools and mechanisms that we are going to create need to be applied in a scientific way rather than in a political way. No, but
Absolutely.
this is something that we will discuss later on. So
Absolutely.
the next presenter is Isidoro Tapia, and Isidoro Tapia is here representing the European Investment Bank, who has been very much in the news in the last year, who is the largest multilateral lender. And just in 2020, last year, the EIB provided around 24 billion to fight climate change. So that's an important investment, and also has committed to increase the environmental area to 50% of the total lending by 2025. No, so Isidoro, we are eager to listen to your opinions.
Thank you, Ivan, and thank you for the invitation to participate today. I mean, let me say first that your question, do we have everything that we need in place in order to reach the 2030 and 2050 targets? That's the question. No? The question that we keep asking ourselves every day at the EIB and in other institutions. Do we have enough? Do we have everything that we need in order to reach these targets? And let me be a bit provocative. It has already been mentioned that the challenge is so huge. We are talking about investing 350 billion per year over the next decade. So that's more than 3 trillion. We're talking about basically a rapid industrial transformation of the whole system in order to decarbonize the EU economy and the world economy. So there is no such thing as enough instruments in this context. Just to give you one number, this past year in 2020, in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, the reduction in CO2 emissions worldwide was around 6-7%, which is only a small step in what we need in order to reach the 2030 and 2050 targets. And of course, nobody wants to reach these targets by collapsing the economy or by sending all the population to be confined in the houses and in their buildings. So this is why I think we need to stop thinking linearly here. So it's not about how close or how far we are. It's more about creating the positive feedback loops, basically in the economy. It's about investing not in a single technology. We cannot bet on a single technology, but on a range of technologies, and being confident that by doing this, the cost of these technologies will decrease, the demand will increase, and this will generate, as I said, a positive feedback loop that will help us and will contribute to the decarbonization of the economy. And it's in this context where I want to put a question, or the answer to the question: do we have enough range of instruments to tackle this challenge? And this is why I'm a bit more optimistic to answer this question. So, for instance, at the EIB, we have a range of instruments going from debt instrument to public or private counterparts to equity investments. So in some cases, we are able to take equity risk ourselves. Guarantees and risk-sharing mechanisms in order to increase the lending to new sectors and new counterparts, because in some cases, for instance, energy efficiency is one of the examples. It's the lack of credit history of some of the counterparts what is with what constitutes an obstacle for the development of the market. And it's also about advisory and technical assistance. So in some cases, the projects, they need a previous preparation in order to be bankable. And this is also a way where we can help and we can contribute to the development of these projects. This is why, as you said, and it was mentioned, the EIB last year adopted a new energy lending policy with 3 overarching goals. The first one was to increase the lending to climate action projects from the current 35-37% to 50% by 2025. So this is an ambitious and also a challenging target, but at the bank we are fully committed to deliver. The second goal is to fully align our lending activity to the Paris Agreement by this year, and that means to stop financing non-abated fossil fuel projects. So as you can imagine, this is a huge change in the bank, an important change, I would say, as compared to what the bank was financing in the past. And third, as a result of this, to mobilize 1 trillion of investments in this decade on climate action and environmental activities. So this is only a small step. It's only a drop in the ocean of what is needed in order to achieve the target. But as I said, there is no silver bullet in this case. There is no single answer, no single technology. Basically, the challenge is to transform the EU economy as a whole, and everything that goes into this direction is needed and is not sufficient, but is needed to contribute to those targets.
Good. So thank you very much, Isidoro. I like something you say around not betting on single technologies. And this is extremely important because the level of development of new technologies, and normally they always over exceed expectations, made it clear that you need to bet on everything, and then we will see which is the best solution to decarbonize the society, who is the main goal. No? So I think that technological neutrality is a key point that we should make. No? Good. So having said that, and thank you very much for all your answers, I really would like to start with some questions that came out of your interventions. No, and the first one is for Elena. I mean, I think we mentioned something around new type of investors, and my question will be, how can risk capital be mobilized in the European Union to contribute to the energy transition and to the European Green Deal? I mean, that's a different way to finance things.
Yes. Well, the first thing that they are looking for, I mean, when you are a private investor, is stability and the opportunity. So there we can have a tick on the box. The second thing is about the returns, the expected returns. And I think that in the last year, it has been proven that everything that has to do with ESG is positively correlated to the best performance in terms of portfolio, in terms of funds, in terms of the stock market. So the thing is that it is possible to do doing good and also making money. And then the third aspect is that we need to change the chip a bit. We need to change the mindset about investing in green. I think that as I am from a generation of the teleñecos, the Muppets, and you remember the frog singing this, it's not easy being green. So now that is going to be also the motto. It's not easy being green and investing in green. And we need a different investor profile. One which is much more patient, and also a more robust type of investor, because we need a lot of capital needs. As Isidoro was saying, it takes time, all these innovations, to be bankable. And for that, you need an investor private investors joining together with public ones, because otherwise the robustness is not achieved, where they bet on capital intensive and many industrial and hardware solution, not only software, and they need to be patient in order to have the returns. Also, the investment process should be changed, because this is, I mean, in InnoEnergy, we have been investing for the last 10 years in sustainable energy. When we started, they called us that we were crazy. Now we are not. Now we are in a hype. But the thing is that what we have learned is that the investment process is not only about financials and not only about technology. And then you need to know about the sector. You need to know to have expertise on the energy sector, and you need to de-risk the business case. That is one of the key things. Isidora was talking before about the necessity of advisory, and that is part of it, in the sense of de-risking the business case in order to make it executable. Okay, and then finally is that we need to change also the mindset in terms of returns. This type of products, investment products, is not only about financial multiples, and we have to get used that the multiples are not what we have seen before. I mean, investing in green is not expecting these high multiples like it was in software, but also it has to do with impact KPIs. And here there is no standard methodologies, yet, but of course the returns should be a change in the mindset of the individual investor, but also on the funds managers, and probably aspects related with the carries should be changed in this new environment. As InnoEnergy, we are trying also to innovate here, and basically just in two examples. One thing is that we are raising now a fund that it is not only about access to capital, but also about de-risking the business case through services, and speeding the time of investment, so that we can accelerate much more the implementation of the innovation onto the market. The other thing that we are betting on are in this kind of industrial value chains. We have been working very seriously with the European within the Battery Alliance, the European Battery Alliance that we are leading. We have just today has been announced the European Solar Initiative, again in industrial movement in order to push scalable and industrial projects in the photovoltaics market. And also we have launched the European Green Hydrogen Accelerator Center, together and with the support of Breakthrough Energy. So these are some of the initiatives, but indeed we need a new type of investor and a new type of investment process for the private money.
Thank you very much. It was a long answer, but a very
Sorry.
good. No, don't worry, and a very good one. And basically, I mean, one thing you say is that we need to act quickly, but at the same time, we need patient investors that are there not just for the returns, but also for the impact. No, and
Yes.
I think that's a very good summary of how the investment panorama is changing in this kind of landscape. No, so thank you very much. Then next, going back to Svetlina Kuzmanova, you mentioned in your speech several times taxonomy, no? And taxonomy is probably a word that 2 years ago no one was talking about it, and now everybody's talking about the European taxonomy as a mechanism to scale up green private finance. So I really would like you, Svetlina, to elaborate a little bit more on the current state of development of the European Union taxonomy, and which points remain still contentious, especially in the design of this taxonomy.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. It is indeed has turned into a buzzword in Europe, but I'm afraid that a lot of people still do not really understand what the taxonomy is. And it is, although we often talk about it in terms of it being a private financial tool, it indeed does not have that much finance in it. It really relates much more to the real economy and looks at different sectors and how different economic activities can classify as green or not green. So in essence, it's a classification system. It's a tool that can guide investments and provide information to both institutional and retail investors who are equally important, what is green and what is not. So it has a lot of potential, as you said, to scale up investments, mainly because we already know that the demand for sustainable products, financial products, is high, and people are really trying to invest more in sustainable solutions and in green solutions. But in essence, it doesn't really tell you, it doesn't have any legally binding obligation to invest or not to invest in something. So it is as good as a tool as we would take it and apply it on a massive scale, on a large scale, to private investments, and how people will really use it to guide their investment choices. And I think it is good in a sense that it creates a common framework across the whole of Europe. And for instance, if we take, we already know that if we take sustainable funds today, ESG funds that are marketed today, and apply the taxonomy to them, actually no more than 10% of their portfolio will be aligned with the taxonomy, which tells you a lot of what we invest in, what we call green and what not. I think the real potential of the taxonomy is, yes, obviously it guides, it safeguards against greenwashing, and it can inform really down the line how to prevent investing in stranded assets. So if we invest in something now that is not Paris aligned and is not aligned with our 2050 net zero goals, in several decades that the returns from that investment will be low. So I think as a guiding principle, it's really good tool, but it also has the potential to be applied to anything, and to be this tool to be applied to EU spending, to private finance, to align it with the EIB and other private banks, lending policies, for instance. So it really has a lot of potential. It is not a magical tool. It's not a magical solution to help divert financial flows to move money where we need it, but indeed, it is this scientific tool based on rigorous scientific data that uses the best-in-class available today technology. It is meant to be a dynamic tool, to be revisited over the years, and to constantly take into account the new technologies that are developed. So I think in that sense, it is this really useful mechanism that we have for both public and private finance. Sorry, my answer was again also very long, but to answer your question, where we are at the moment is almost at the finishing line, and I think we are expecting, a lot of people are expecting this to be finally ready so that people can start applying it. It has been developed for several years, and it has taken the time and efforts of hundreds of experts and policymakers and private sector participants. We are, as I said, at the finishing line now. It has attracted a lot of interest from public and private sector, from member states equally. So we are in a situation where we can't really reconcile our differences. So I expect in the next month to really see this going forward and to really finalizing and as I said, to lay the ground and to be the leader in that aspect for the world.
Okay. Thank
Ivan?
you very much, Svetlina. I think Europe started as a community for coal and steel, and now I think we are moving into a community or a European Union of clean energy. No? And then we'll talk later on with Elena about steel, because I think there are some recent announcements around the green steel things. So
Ivan?
let's move to Isidoro, and the European Investment Bank represents probably 1/3 of all the climate finance provided by multinational development banks. But climate change being a global issue, and we need to decarbonize not only Europe, we need to decarbonize the world if we really want to have effect. My question to Isidoro will be, how can the European Investment Bank help countries in the European neighborhood or beyond that with the respective energy transitions, how we can provide support to other countries to be green?
Yes, you said that. One of the issues about the climate change is the complicated equilibrium between developed and developing countries. Because as you all know, climate change is about the stock of emissions in the atmosphere. But of course, the historical stock of emissions it was basically produced by developed countries. But for the time being, we cannot tackle the historical stock of emission. We can only tackle the flow of emissions every year. And in the flow of emissions, of new emissions every year, the majority of the emissions come from developing countries. So there is this difficult equilibrium between one and the other. What can we do? What are we doing at the EIB to contribute to this? First, let me say the EIB is the bank of the EU. Of course, that means that the majority of our activity, around 90% of our activity, is in the EU. Having said that, only last year we lent 7.6 billion to projects outside of the EU. So, the scale of the intervention of the EIB is so huge that even a 10% of our overall activity is already a big amount. So 7.6 billion outside of the EU, the majority to climate action projects. And outside of the EU, there are some important differences. The first one, as I said, is that energy demand is increasing. So the International Energy Agency has estimated that because of energy demand increasing, the investment needs outside of the EU are 7 times higher than the investment needs in the EU. So that means that the need for public and private financing outside of the EU is even higher. And because the situation is different, the opportunities, the specific sectors that are being targeted are also different. For instance, energy efficiency is more common inside of the EU only because energy intensity is higher in the EU economy than outside of the EU, where we tend to focus on projects on new generation projects, renewable energy, and other things. The goals also are different. So access to energy remains a fundamental issue outside of the EU. It's one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and this is something that we need to take into account. There are people that they don't have access to energy yet, and increasing the availability of energy, it's something essential for the development of these countries and for the development of the people living in this country. And finally, I would like to say that, as you probably know, in the context of the Paris Agreement, all countries have submitted their national determined contribution plans. Taking into account these national determined contribution plans, there is still a gap to comply with the decarbonization scenario of the Paris Agreement. But what I wanted to say is that the in these national determined contribution plans, the new economy, the decarbonized economy, has a very important component of fixed cost, something that has to be invested upfront and has to be financed upfront. So the decarbonized economy is an economy where variable costs are much lower and fixed costs are much higher. And in this context, the role of public institutions or public financing institutions and also of private financing is going to be crucial to be able to finance these huge upfront investments that are needed to decarbonize the economies.
Good. So thank you very much, Isidoro, on your answer. And now I would like to ask all of you one question. I mean, there is no webinar that takes place right now that doesn't address the COVID-19 issue. So my question will be for all of you around that. And so how do you evaluate the impact of COVID-19 on private and public investments in the energy transition and the European Green Deal? So who starts?
I can go first.
Good.
This is, as you said, the music of the day. So how COVID-19 is going to change the medium and long term. There are a lot of uncertainties, of course, around this. I would like to say first that there is some similarities between COVID-19 and climate change that are worth to be mentioned. I mean, the first one is we have seen how important it is global coordination in order to get a vaccine or to develop a vaccine and to stop a pandemic. But it is also as important in order to fight climate change, because both COVID-19 pandemic and climate change are public goods, so they can only be tackled with global coordination. But I would like to say a second thing that it's also very similar, and it's the cost of inaction. So we have seen how dangerous it is to delay some of the reactions or the answers to the spread of the virus. And that's very similar to what we can experience with climate change. So there are some tipping points in climate change. If we don't act rapidly enough, if we don't act quickly, we might be in a position where there is no turning back, basically. And the third thing is how this is going to impact our day-to-day, how it's going to impact the medium term. And in my view, there are a lot of uncertainties around here. So is there going to be a shift from office buildings, for instance, to residential buildings? So teleworking is going to stay or not? The impact on transport and mobility, it's also a question mark. How is going to affect the post-COVID world to this sector, tourism, etc. But something that I wanted to say is that, and we are seeing this, is that energy-intensive industries, actually, they are rebounding more rapidly than other industries. And as a result of this, and this makes sense, of course, because there is more social distance in energy-intensive industries, so there are less opportunities for the virus to spread. But that means that as a result of the crisis, we can see an economy which is more energy intensive, and this is actually something that already happened in the after the financial crisis in 2009, 2010. So this is something that it is also important to keep in mind, especially in the design of the recovery plans, and this is why in the next generation instrument, climate change has such an important role to play.
Yeah.
Elena or Svetlana, do you have
yes
view or different points?
No, it's not different, but it is a bit complementary. I think that Isidoro was mentioning the cost of inactivity, and I think that this is a very nice concept. And I'm going to go to more from the perspective of the investor, what it happened 1 year ago, no? In March, when suddenly, for instance, in our case, we have more than 200 companies in our portfolio, very young companies, and suddenly we had to react. Okay, and this means that in something like about 3 weeks, we had to make 2,000 calls and telcos in order to get to know what was happening to them. I mean, what was the reaction? And this means that something that it has been really a period where we have been learning a lot. I mean, for us, it has been very positive, because something that we have understood is that how fragile, I mean, it's this wall about the innovators, because and how quickly we have to react in order to save it. We had been investing, and Europe had been investing for the last years in keeping this say ecosystem around climate tech, and we could not allow at this moment to lose it, because that was the future. So I remember that for me and for all our team, it was a horrible moment in time, because we were just all the time at home with telcos, screenings, and analyzing the situation of these young companies. So what we learned is that they affected the sales, especially for the ones that they were more mature. For the ones that they were more in an early stage, they were not so much dependent on the sales, so they were safer. But for the ones that were already exposed to the market, they suffer dramatic consequences. Then they suffer because the working capital, I mean, they were little companies, so early stage companies. So on average at that moment, they had just cash in order to be maintained, to a set of them just some months. And then the capital increases at some moment of time. At the very first beginning, they stop. So it was quite a situation, and the interesting thing also is that we learned that the supply chains, where they are located, are very important in order to be able to meet the system commitments. So I think that in 1 month we were able to mobilize 7 million euros and to deploy them. It was an investment committee after the other, and indeed all of our startup of our companies have maintained, and we have repeated the exercise, I mean, just 3 weeks ago, because COVID still is there. And one of the interesting things is that they have learned in terms of resilience, they have learned in terms of managing with uncertainty. And I think that today we have our companies, our innovators in Europe, much better prepared than what they were, I mean, some months ago. So I'm still being optimistic in the sense that despite COVID, we have learned. And by the way, something that Isidoro was mentioning, the funds and the portfolios related with climate change have been the ones that has received much more, and even the valuation has increased. So what I was saying at the very first beginning, that I mean the investors and the market has valued this environmental focus of these assets.
Ivan, if I may
anything
jump
to
in.
add?
Yeah, let me say that I fully agree with Isidoro and Elena. I just wanted to mention maybe the aspect of the synergies between the COVID pandemic and the climate change. And I agree that we have seen a lot of positives to the climate as well. And we've all seen the stories of, well, wildlife is returning, we're using less energy, and the waters of the Venice canals, for instance, are clearer. But I think this is a very slippery slope, and we should really look at climate change and the pandemic together, because this all links together to having healthy ecosystems and having healthy biodiversity. And this is why I prefer to use sustainability rather than green, because this is not only about the green aspect of things, it is also about the social and the fairness issue. It is also about incorporating biodiversity and wildlife into the story as well. But finally, just to mention silver lining that I already talked about briefly in the beginning, we do have this opportunity of really reviving the economy and to do it in the right way, technologically, sustainably. So I think the recovery fund and the recovery spending in Europe really has this great opportunity to do this. And just to flag here for those of you that it might be interesting, my colleagues at E3G together with the Wuppertal Institute have developed this green recovery tracker. So they're basically tracking all member states' spending of their recovery plans and how green versus how polluting they are, and to really see what percentage, what amount of this money will go into green investment. So it is live. I think they've started with several member states because the plans are not all plans are public yet. They will be approved by the European Commission in April. But I think it is really good to see in reality how much of what we are doing here in Europe, what we are striving for, is actually sustainable.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I mean, your answer has been a little bit longer than expected, and I am seeing in the chat that there are plenty of questions from the audience. So let's give some time to the audience. So I will select 3 questions for you to answer. I mean, don't need to everybody answer every question, just focus on the one you think is most relevant to you. The first one is, and that probably goes to Elena, it says, Elena, where do you find the robust and patient investor needed? It may take too long to wait to educate the critical mass of that green energy investor profile needed. That's one question. Another question is from Adrianus Gentiluzzi. He says, in the past few years, European Union bet on natural gas with the construction of pipeline corridors and LNG terminals to secure supply. Has this changed, or natural gas has still a role in the energy transition? And there is another one about what is the role of the private sector in terms of investment and innovation. So 3 questions. Who answered which?
Okay, if I start with the one that you were mentioning about where do we find that robust and patient investor? I think that we have these patient investors. I think that some of them are coming from more and more family offices in Europe. I mean, it is true that the dynamics of investment are not the same. We are seeing many differences between the north of Europe and the south of Europe, for instance, in terms of logic to invest. But usually this impact investor, because it is coming also from some of them from family offices, is they need to do good at the same time that they are making money, and this is something that it is relevant. Also, I think that it is true. It may take time, but we need to democratize the investment in sustainability. We need to make it open not only to some investors, but to any investors, all of us as individuals, as citizens. And we need, I think that is the way that we can be engaged. Sometimes one of the problems that we have in Europe is the business to consumer type of innovations, because we need to put the citizen and we need to put the consumer in the equation. Okay, so one way to do it would be starting by involving all of us in the investment process. And I have an example. I mean, one of our companies have raised 10 million euros with crowdfunding. Of course, not in the south of Europe, more in the north and central. But I mean, 10 million. I mean, this is quite an amount of money. So there are investors, but also in combination, because the robustness means capital intensive with the public ones.
So yes, there are.
There.
Who takes another question? The gas one, or
I can. Yeah, I'd like to take the gas question, although I'm sure that the others might want to jump in as well, because this is something that currently keeps me awake at night. It's something that I'm trying to wrap my head around. I might not necessarily be answering directly the question that that someone from the audience had, but especially with the taxonomy conversation right now, and also within the just transition and the conversations around the European climate law, natural gas keeps coming up when making a decision, when really when it really comes down to voting and member states voting. So the issue that that we had with the taxonomy recently is because the current threshold, the current criteria for classifying something as green does not allow for natural gas. Because natural gas, we don't see it as something green if it doesn't have carbon capture and storage technology. But a lot of countries do see natural gas as a transition fuel. They frame it as a transition fuel to transition from coal power generation, especially for coal-dependent regions and countries, to meet their Paris commitments and the commitments under the European Green Deal. And here I want to say that, first of all, let's, if it's not green, let's not call it green. So such things as, oh, natural gas is green, let's not go there. Let's call things, and let's be really clear and transparent, let's call things with their real names. But this opens the other question around fairness and what different regions and different countries might need in terms of their capabilities at the moment and their future needs in order to decarbonize. And this 2030 target for the European Union, it's a joint target, but eventually we will have to have by 2050 a carbon neutral Europe. So any investments in gas now, and for instance, a gas power plant has a lifespan of several decades. So it is one investment life cycle away from becoming a stranded asset. So natural gas is indeed this issue that stumbles a lot of the negotiations and a lot of the discussions in Brussels as well. But I think we need to look at this from the bigger picture of possible mechanisms within the EU, not only within the private sector, because no one can tell you don't invest in this, especially when we talk about the private sector. None of the EU mechanisms and tools can tell you, oh, you should invest in this and not invest in that. So if you want to really build a gas power plant, no one can stop you. But it's important to really consider here something that Elena also mentioned, that's the climate risk, as in sense of being a financial risk down the line in several years when such technology is supposed to be obsolete. So yeah, I don't have a definite answer here, but I think it is important to first understand all of the available mechanisms for transition and to really be transparent and to really talk to one another, to really see what different countries' needs are and how we can best meet them without compromising with our greenhouse gas emissions.
Good. So the final question
Ivan,
for Isidoro about the private
sorry,
sector.
Ivan, can I add
think,
something to the gas question?
Yes.
We
have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, just to clarify, because I mean, at the EIB, we used to say we are not policy makers, we're policy takers. So the EU policy is defined by the European Commission and by the member states. And as you know, I mean, in the EU decarbonization scenarios, gas still plays a role in the coming decades. When I mentioned the Paris alignment decision of the EIB, what I was referring to basically was that gas projects, of course, they will happen, but not really gas projects. What we mean is unabated gas projects will not happen with the EIB support, basically. And this was a decision that was taken by the EIB shareholders. But just to clarify, of course, the EU policy is defined by the Commission and member states, and in that sense, gas still has a role to play.
And I think it was, sorry.
Private sector?
Now I think that we have forgotten the question, but I just wanted to say something very small, and it is that in this is an energy transition and it is an evolution, not a revolution. So we have to count with everyone, and this implies that oil and gas companies, not projects, but oil and gas companies should be also part of the solution. And this is something that sometimes we forget with the principles and we started finger point about which are the green and the not green and whatever. And I think that independently of the projects, they are part also of the solution, and we have to take them into account.
Yeah. Svetlana, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, I think I just wanted, following from Isadora's comment, to mention Werner Hoyer's quote that he said, to put it mildly, gas is over. So I think EIB here really might not be a policymaker, but plays a very important role in this negotiation.
Good. So we are nearly past the hour. So I would like to end up, and I'm really sorry because we have plenty of questions in the list, and I think this topic will deserve another 1 hour. But let me finish with the tweet. And here I really want something, a headline, a tweet, no? And the question for the tweet is the following one: what is the main obstacle in current EU policies and regulations that hinder the development of sustainable finance and the integration and management of climate, environmental, and social risk into financial decision making? It was a long question so that you can prepare your answer, but now I need a one-sentence answer. So Isidoro, starting by the end.
The transparency, disclosure, and climate tracking. So I know it's not this is a tweet. I know maybe it's not the most exciting topic in principle, but I really believe that the taxonomy is a game changer in this sense.
Very clear and to the point. Svetlana?
I completely agree. My tweet would be that the main hindrance to the development of sustainable finance and incorporating climate considerations in the decision making is the diverging level of ambition and capacity across the EU. So in order to finance transition, we need to climate-proof the whole of the financial system, and we need to make sure that we do it in a fair and inclusive way.
Okay. And Elena?
I would say that as a summary of or kind of a tweet, Europe can lead the global climate change race, but the ambition is not enough. We need execution capability, and this is scalability plus speed.
So I think that with all these tweets and messages, we are ending the session. Thank you very much for the fantastic group of panelists we have had. Thank you very much for the audience. I'm really sorry about the questions that we could not answer, but that tells us that we may need to organize something similar in the coming months because things are changing every day. So thank you very much, and I hope you have enjoyed the session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.